Welcome to Fright Night. For real.
Well, I was writing a movie called Cloak and Dagger, and it was based on The Window, and Cloak and Dagger turned into something completely different. But when I was trying to think of situations where somebody would look out a window, rear window, and see something going on next door, it occurred to me that a great Boy Who Cried Wolf situation would be of a teen horror movie fan looking out the window and seeing a vampire next door, because nobody would believe him. And I just thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever thought of. And I carried that around for about a year in my head. And I had a premise, but I didn't really have a story. And I kept saying, well, what would I do if I, because I was a fan when I was growing up, and I kept thinking, well, what would, a horror movie fan, and what would I do? And then it occurred to me, well, I'd go to one of those horror movie hosts that I'd grown up with. Because the only time you could see horror movies when I was a kid was on the independent channels at like 11 o'clock on a Friday night. And everybody called them the Friday Night Frights. And throughout the country, they had all these different hosts like Stagger Lee and Vampira, and every different, geographical area had one. And that's how I thought of Peter Vincent. And the minute I had Peter Vincent, I had the story. Just fell into place in my head, and I couldn't get home fast enough to write it. One of the most fun writing experiences that I've ever had, because I chuckled all the way through. I think I wrote the first draft in about 3 weeks, but I thought about it for a solid year, and I thought of so many scenes, but Peter Vincent was the heart of it. Charlie Brewster is the engine, but Peter Vincent was the heart, and it was when I found the heart that I think that, and I think also that's one of the reasons that the movie has lasted as long as it has. Because it does have a heart, and Roddy McDowall provided it, and he was playing as an image of the Cowardly Lion, and so that brought a lot of warmth to it. There are those wonderful moments when when he's approaching the house to go in and make the final stand with Charlie, and then the door opens with the creak, and you see him go, well, maybe we should sneak around at the back. But I mean, there's something delightful, and Roddy knew how to play that. I had a wonderful casting director named Jackie Birch, and she brought me wonderful people, and we found Charlie pretty quick, and Evil Ed, and we had to search really hard to find Amanda. But there wasn't the girl, there wasn't the perfect girl next door until she walked in. I can't explain that. And the Roddy I had worked with, I'd written a movie called Class of '84, where he played a teacher just previous to Fright Night, and he was just sensational. And he understood the part, and he also understood what he could do with it, and he really wanted it. And the one that I had to convince was Chris Sarandon, who was working all the time, and he was experienced, and I was a first-time director. So I had to convince him that I was going to be able to make it all work. But once again, the parts were so good. There were a lot of delicious scenes for every one of them. Every one of them had their moments. And I took more time in that movie to rehearse than I ever have in anything since, because I've never had the time since then. But I rehearsed for 2 weeks. And I mean, we blocked it out, and then at the end, I put it on its feet in the sound stage, and I took chairs and masking tape and laid out the dimensions of the room, and we ran it all the way through like a play. They all brought so much to it, all the actors. But it's also the 2 weeks of rehearsal, because everybody could try and succeed or fail, and they could develop their characters. I mean, I did 2 and 3 takes and then per shot, and that was it, and moved on. I mean, they could have gone on the road with it as a stage play, and played it. The cast was that good at it. And this thing happened, and so much of it was the cast, was how that group came together and worked with each other, and so much of it was the magic that they created. Yes, the effects work. Yes, the practical effects work, and and the latex, and all the bat turning into a human, Chris turning into a bat. But it's finally that somehow those people those actors came to care enough for each other and understood their characters well enough that they brought that warmth and that reality and sweetness to the movie. Columbia could have cared less. Their big movie that year was Perfect. Ring a bell? No, okay. It was Jamie Lee Curtis and John Travolta, two of the hottest actors in America. And I think somewhere in there they had Slugger's wife too. I think that was Rebecca De Mornay and somebody. But Perfect was their big movie. And that's where all the money and all the attention was focused on. Nobody paid any attention to Fright Night. It was wonderful. It was the first and last time in my life. But I mean, I really had absolutely no interference and very, very support from the studio. I think it snuck under the radar. And I remember it as being a solid performer, but not a big hit. But where it really blew out of the gate were in the foreign dates, like Japan and Spain and Germany. I mean, so I think it was much bigger overseas than it was here. But then it never stopped. You know, I mean, it's funny. You know, Fright Night was not Fright Night. Psycho 2 was huge because everybody was hungering to see, you know, Tony playing Norman again. Child's Play was huge out of the gate. That made, you know, Chucky made it with, you know, with one huge rush, and then it trended down. Fright Night opened and it just kept going, and I can't explain how. Part of all this, it's about voice. Okay, it's about being able to tell stories, and if you can be in touch enough with what's inside of you, and if you can somehow get that on the page, and then if you can somehow get actors to play it, then you'll create something that's special. It's very, very hard to do. I mean, because you have so many different people, and so you have to convince them of your creation, or of your story, of your people. So therefore, the work has to have enough emotional resonance for people. It has to be in their reality too. And I think that I somehow wrote people that the audience cared about. And it's an old line, you know, you're as involved with a horror movie as in direct proportion to how much you care about the people. And if the people are just kills and just victims, then there's no emotional involvement. But if you really feel something for the characters involved, it makes it better. And I think the actors brought so much to Fright Night and created those characters, and people have cared about them. I think I was just very, very lucky. But I also worked very hard. The film was in reaction partially to the onslaught of mindless slasher films, and because I mean that's what it was. There was this tide of everybody copying, you know, John Carpenter's Halloween, and it had gotten silly. They were beating the slasher genre to death. That's why, you know, Roddy McDowell says all they want is, you know, young virgins being hacked up by people in ski masks. They'd given up on making monster films when I made Fright Night. Vampires were considered, it's hard to believe now, but they were considered the kiss of death because they'd all failed, and they'd had a huge failure in Frank Langella's Dracula, you know, which had been a huge stage play. But as a movie, you know, it seemed old and ponderous. And then after that came Love at First Bite with George Hamilton, which is a comedy and a farce. And I think when you move to farce, you're showing how exhausted the genre is. And that's where it was at the moment that I got to do Fright Night. Modestly, I think in a lot of ways, you know, Fright Night kicked off the resuscitation of the vampire genre, which is with us now 25 years later. But Vincent Price and Peter Cushing were my two favorite horror movie actors, one with AIP and one with Hammer. And that's what I had grown up with. You know, and all of that had really sort of been wrecked by Psycho in '61. But those were the films that I remembered so fondly because they were silly on some level. They were harmless fun, maybe because they were saturated with so much color and the sets were so gothic. but you know, or Vincent Price was so big, large. But I mean, so you had a lot of horror movie hosts that started, you know, making fun of them. And that was the time when you couldn't get a horror movie on TV. There's something comedic at the core of that, but you can see how a panicked teen horror addict, you know, would reach out to somebody like Peter Vincent if he had a deadly vampire living next door. It really is, you know, the boy who cried wolf. You know, I mean, you know, who's going to believe you? I mean, that is so ridiculous, but yet it's so delicious. I mean, I wish it happened to me. I mean, it would be great fun if you managed to survive it. It was Herb Jaffe, it was Vista Films. I brought Herb in as a producer on Fright Night. I was not available. I was working on another project at MGM. All they wanted to do was for a lot less money. You know, so so Tommy Lee Wallace didn't have a lot of room to work. And that was what was going on then. I mean, you know, sequels were really in disrepute in 1986 or whatever it was, and with good reason. In the sequel, they were looking to make money. They weren't looking to make a good movie. But I wasn't available. Otherwise, I would have. But I got to tell you again, Herb Jaffe didn't want to pay me to write it. It's very, very hard to protect, you know, your children. The rights went to Herb Jaffe. The remake rights went to Herb Jaffe. He set up a company named Vista Films. He did it on the strength of the success of Fright Night, even though Herb had been producing for years. And then they did a series of films, including Fright Night. I don't know whether Fright Night 2 made any money or not, but a number of the films that Vista did not. And at some point, Vista went bankrupt, and it somehow ended up with Live Entertainment. Live Entertainment was a video house, and it made all the money out of VHS. Live Entertainment was run by a man named Menendez, who Roddy was meeting with, and I was slated to meet with about doing a third sequel. And then this could only happen in Hollywood, I hope. Then Menendez was killed. He and his wife were killed by his children. And there was the huge scandal in Beverly Hills. Two of his sons shotgunned their parents to death. Obviously, the deal for the remake of Fright Night 3 fell apart, and Carolco bought Live Entertainment and got all the rights, all the remake rights to Fright Night. And then Carolco went bankrupt, and all the rights ended up with Sony, wow, who then sold them to DreamWorks. I mean, now how's that for a lineage? If the original film, like a Psycho 2 or a Child's Play, or you know, or Class of '84, I mean, if it made money, then they would do sequels, but every one of them would cost less. And you could see that with Fright Night 2. They didn't want to pay Chris Sarandon. Herb Jaffe didn't want to pay Chris Sarandon to come back. Terrible, terrible mistakes were made. Not that the girl wasn't wonderful, but you know, it's why sequels had a bad name then. It's because they really just went cheaper and cheaper. And now, of course, they're putting huge money into remakes. So they step it up today. In the 80s and the 90s, they did not. They were starving them. What they were is what they do is they look at their marketing costs and their budget costs. They have printouts because, you know, there's a way to quantify all this now, and they can see how the grosses fall off over X number of weeks, and they peg their marketing to that. And they can really get very specific once they have the grosses of the original movie. And that's how they used to do it, and I'm sure they have something like that now. But the market's gone global, so the numbers have gone up. What you hope is that somebody wants to make something good as well as make money.
Yes.
And of course, if it is good, then it'll make money. And you hope that happens. But you know, making a good movie takes a little bit of luck too. No matter, with all the planning and all the money in the world, it won't help you if God doesn't smile at you. But I remember it was also the beginning of the corporatization of Hollywood, because Coca-Cola owned or had just bought Columbia at the time, and they refused. I didn't feel they supported the movie well enough after it opened, and that was because the marketing team from Columbia had moved in and had all these, from Coca-Cola had moved in and had all these printouts saying that, you know, you progressively starve the movie for marketing, and the longer it's out there. The longer it's out there, the less you spend, because the less you get in marketing, because the less you're going to see back. And I thought that they really cut off and didn't support Fright Night because it was released like late, what they considered the slow time, late August. You know, when it could sneak in under. The audience reaction was exceptional, and it was because of the things you've been talking about. They would do all these ads like "How scared were you?" and everything, but that wasn't what Fright Night was about. Yes, it was about the roller coaster ride that happens in the third act, but you had these people, these characters who had sweetness to them and who were involved with each other and who you really came to care about as an audience member. And that was the magic of the cast. And I think that that's what changed it. I don't think the studio realized that, ever. It'll carry on the original to more generations. As the original's gone from generation to generation, now this'll happen with with the remake. And people will go back and check out the original again. I think it's good for everybody, as long as they make a good film, and from everything I've heard that they have, and I thought the script was terrific, so, you just wish them the best. All the remakes and all the sequels, every one of them will have a different take, a different style, different images, different dialogue, and that's the voice of the author coming through. It gets muffled a lot in film because it's such a collaborative medium, because it's the writer, and then it's so director influenced, but finally it's the blank page. But it's somehow getting everybody, all these different crafts and actors and cinematographers and everybody, to come together and to head in the same direction. And it's a little bit or a lot like herding cats. But if you can do that, and if what you feel is you, then it's going to be original, then you can come up with something like a Fright Night or like a number of them. But then of course I have the ones that have been born stillborn too. So, but I mean, that's the secret somehow. It's getting your voice through in a very, very collaborative medium. I was trying to bring back all those universal creatures that I'd been so fond of, that I'd seen once again as a kid, but they're all the movies from the 30s and 40s and 50s. I did Abbott and Costello, Meet Frankenstein, coming up that staircase, where Roddy and Charlie Brewster were walking up the staircase, and then Jonathan Starks, after being shot in the head, sits up behind them, and then he starts, everybody, whoop, I hear a creak behind me. Ah! That is a moment that sensibility, anyway, is lifted out of Abbott and Costello, because that's what I grew up with. I grew up with the Wolfman. I grew up with Frankenstein. I mean, I just think those, and then they, then Hammer, redid them all, and they had all died off, and so I was trying to resuscitate them in a modern way. I was surrounded with, and I didn't know it because I was too new, but I was surrounded with some of the best and most talented craftsmen that Hollywood had to offer at the moment. You had Richard Edlund, who was just coming off of Ghostbusters, and they had made all their mistakes with how to do the matte shots and everything on Ghostbusters with their huge budget, and so they really knew how to do it as inexpensively and as efficiently as it could be done at the time. And Richard provided wonderful people like Randy Cook and Steve Johnson to do the actual effects. And then you had people don't think about it, but you had John DeCure Sr., who was the production designer along with his son, John Jr. And what they didn't know about making movies, I still couldn't even begin. John DeCure Sr. did Cleopatra. He did The King and I. He did Ghostbusters. What happened was, Shel Schrager, who was head of production at Columbia, and terrific, the physical production, provided me with all the best guys who'd worked on Ghostbusters for Columbia. So I got an A crew, a big budget crew, on this tiny little movie called Fright Night, which was the least of Columbia's releases that year. It was a throwaway. Guy McElwain, who gave the go-ahead, never figured that it would amount to anything. You know, it was like, well, let's take a chance on the hot screenwriter kid. I was very specific in the script, and I certainly had ideas, and I had a ton of things cut out from magazines, you know, of monsters and looks and clothes and things like that I liked. But they were very, very talented guys. This may have been Steve Johnson's first job, or very, very close to it. Randy, you know, Cook, who's turned into, you know, did King Kong and Lord of the Rings, was a talented sculptor. I mean, it was Richard Edlund who put those guys together, but there's just a lot of talented people came to work on Fright Night. It was that amazing moment, you know, what they were in between these big pictures. They took and ran with it. I mean, I've got the Polaroids of the creatures in the back room. You can see how they were being put together, and you can see Steve Johnson when he was a young man. But I mean, you can see the talent as you see the creatures being formed. Those people were chosen for me. What I'm saying is that I was led by the hand by Richard Edlund and John DeCure Sr. and Shel Schrager at Columbia, and they put together a great group of artisans to work on what was really an old-fashioned, you know, monster picture, you know, dressed up. A lot of that came out of meetings with Richard Edlund, where he told me what was possible and how to, and John DeCure Sr. too, how we were going to do the transformations, whether it was on cuts or, you know, we'd cut back and forth the reaction shots, and then you'd, you know, off screen you'd do the makeup and you'd come back to it, or hanging on the character like the cross disappearing from Evil Ed. Well, that, you know, and you see it all happen in one on the screen. So the idea then, this was before CGI, was that you'd have it, your money shots would be those ones where you saw it happen all in one right before your eyes, so you knew that there was no trickery involved, and you'd mix that in with the easier, more affordable, you know, doing the changes on the cuts. But those guys led me by the hand to, you know, to understand how to do it, because economics, you know, I didn't understand so much about, you know, then, about the cost and how you can do things less expensively. I learned so much on that picture. We're sitting next to what's left of Jerry Dandridge at the end of the movie when he's burned. Give credit to Jan Kieser, the cinematographer. I mean, he was the one who pushed me to shoot anamorphic. I thought that shooting anamorphic, where, you know, where probably 60% of the film was in a house, well, I would have thought, you know, you would have gone, you know, 3.5 or whatever. But he did. You know, he pushed me, and it looks great. So it was Jan. Jan did something else too. He lit the hell out of it. He had a real talent painting with, or he has a real talent painting with light. And then, as opposed to now with all the video cameras, you really had to pick your shots because it took so long to light them. Mm-hmm. So you had to be very parsimonious with your coverage. And Jan was wonderful at seeing moves with the camera that followed the actors, because I had all the scenes blocked, and with some of them like that scene with Charlie going to Peter Vincent's apartment and begging him after the disco, and begging him to help him get Amy back, and it's all done in one shot, and that really is Jan Kieser.
Peter! Peter, open the door! Who is it? It's me, Charlie Brewster. Let me in. Come on.
He had lit, you know, for those places where the actors stopped. And it was how we were running out of time, and it was how to do it. So, I mean, I learned so much. I really did. Thank you, Jan Kieser, wherever you are. I think he's in Canada. Universal didn't know they had anything on their hands with Psycho 2. Psycho 2 started out as a cable movie. And it was only when Tony Perkins said, I want to play Norman again in Psycho 2, and there was this huge worldwide interest, that Columbia realized they might have a low-budget feature. So it's very hard to realize within the bureaucracy of a studio what anybody realizes, especially about the catalog. because that, you know, that it used to be that nobody was looking at it. It was the cash cow, but nobody paid any attention to it. And you know, and everybody would go back and comb through the catalogs trying to see if there was something that you could remake again. But it, you know, it certainly then didn't have the interest that it does now. It's the fans who've made Fright Night. It's the fact that parents showed it to their kids, and the kids loved it as much as the parents did, and then they showed their kids. And now with the remake, it'll go on to more generations, and they're very, very positive values. I don't want to be corny, but I mean it's about friendship, it's about caring, it's about the older man trying to take your girl away, you know, and he's got big teeth on top of it. You know, I mean it's all these feelings, but they're all biblical. They're all underneath the fantasy, what people are going through is all too human. Nobody knows what's in your head really until it's there to be seen. You can describe it on the page, but my experience is when you're working with, you know, with creatures or with fantasy, that people get sort of an idea, but it's when they see it that they really, really, you know. A lot of people were surprised by the movie because of the level of the creature workmanship. One of the things that vampires have always represented is, you know, is wantonness, is sexual, you know, liberation. Once you're bit by a vampire, you can be as wanton as you want. You're released from, you know, from all morality. It was a more innocent time, you know. If she's not a nice girl, where do you go when she's seduced by Jerry? I guess it's really my own Victorian background. I hadn't thought about that before, but it just would feel terrible if you opened up and you had two teenagers having you know, wild sex in the bedroom.
Charlie, I said stop it! Jesus, Amy, give me a break. We've been going together almost a year, and all I ever hear is Charlie, stop it.
That doesn't strike me as the, you know, even now. But I mean, the whole thing, of course, is you know, is that Jerry, you know, breaks through that. That's what the bite in the shoulder is, and the blood. That's the blood of the maidenhead going down her back. It's sensuality. It's erotica. It isn't pornography. And I mean, repression is that's where sexual desire comes from. Mm-hmm. It doesn't come from group sex or orgies or whatever. Yeah. No, I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea. Well, I mean, I knew Roddy was gay, you know. I mean, but I didn't know Amanda was. You know, there was a certain amount of tension between Roddy and Stephen Jeffries, but I wasn't particularly aware that Stephen was gay. But you know, I thought since then that perhaps some of the tension between Roddy and Stephen might have been because of it. You'd have to ask Stephen Jeffries that. The stuff with Chris Sarandon and Jonathan Igor, that's me.
Well, yes, of course. I'm always willing to help young people, but I'm afraid that crosses are out of the question.
I always thought that vampires were, you know, they didn't care who they bit. You know, blood was blood. The sex didn't make a difference. When Chris reaches out and says to Evil Ed, "Take my hand, you know, take my hand. I know you've been different. I'll protect you. They won't beat you up anymore. They won't bully you."
I know what it's like being different. Only they won't pick on you anymore or beat you up. I'll see to that. All you have to do is take my hand. Here, Edward. Take my hand.
Yes, you could say that Evil Ed is the gay kid who's bullied, but I wasn't thinking of that. I was thinking he's the kid that reads all those EC comic books in back of the post office, you know, and who loves Tales of the Crypt, you know, and who's building models of blood and gore. And that was more like me, and that was more like, well, you know, people would like, why are you interested in that stuff? You know, it was not cool. Back in the 60s, it wasn't cool. It didn't get cool until the 70s, and like it didn't blow open in the late 70s. I mean, in the 4th grade, there must have been, but all the way through, there were always 2 or 3 evil Eds. There was always the high school quarterback, or the most popular kid, or the one who was, the student body, president, and all that. And that was echoing in my head, because when I was falling in love with horror films, there really wasn't the fan base that there is now, and it was like reading comic books. It was disreputable. Even after Psycho, it took damn near 15 years before it started to really, the horror genre started to become a thing of its own, and started to throw off the Hammer kind of more theatrical horror based on the Poe-tales. It's been interesting. The genre's only growing and growing, and it's become, it can handle so many metaphors, and because that's what we're talking about with Fright Night, is the implications now. But I don't know if you would have thought of those things back in 1984 or 5. Nobody would have asked these questions in 1990, or a lot of them anyway. Nobody's ever called me from Columbia/Sony. You'd think they would by now, but as I say, the catalog bureaucracies are so unresponsive. But I hope somebody down in Austin at the Austin Film Festival whispered to me that they had heard an independent company was going to do it, the Blu-ray. But I don't know if it was true, and it went in one ear and out the other. I was so busy. I know Roddy McDowell took all these 8mm films when we were shooting, and nobody can find them. I know that Roddy had he had so many of the costumes from Planet of the Apes. Roddy was way ahead of all of us at being aware of props. Roddy took the vampire case, and I know he gave it to that college that's up in Rhode Island, and I forget what it is. Jonathan Stark knows which college it is. It's where Roddy decided to to leave all of his vast collection.
Flashlight, stakes, hammer, yes. Cross. What about Billy Cole? How are you going to stop him? I'm going to use this. It is from Orgy of the Damned.
What would really be interesting is where is all of his 35mm and 16mm films, because he had an enormous collection, and at one point the studios sued him. But when I wanted a film that I couldn't find anywhere because it was too old or too archaic, I could ask Roddy, and Roddy quite often had a 35mm print and would strike a VHS for me. Wow. Yeah, it was really amazing. He had all the stuff with Ronald Coleman, for instance. Roddy said that Hollywood has no history, and that's one of the things we're talking about here. H.N. Swanson, otherwise known as Swanee, said you have no friends in Hollywood, only business acquaintances. But Roddy was a walking oral history of Hollywood. Roddy worshipped the stars that he remembered from when he was a boy, and a lot of them were silent movie stars. And he stayed friends. I can't remember the names, but a lot of the stars that were out in the motion picture home. Roddy was just wonderful. Roddy took me in and when MGM was closing down, MGM is now Sony. Roddy walked me around the MGM lot where he had gone to school. I think Elizabeth Taylor was there too, and he would point out to me what movies were filmed on what sound stages, where Katharine Hepburn met Spencer Tracy, where Judy Garland's studio was. We walked. They have tunnels. They used to have tunnels underneath for all the all the utilities, but they would also put their nitrate film down there and store them. And Roddy walked me through all of that, and showed me where the films were kept, back when. It was the end of MGM, and he remembered. And Debbie Reynolds was smarter than all of us and bought a lot of the props. I thank you very, very much. I thank you, Brian, very much for a wonderful time and very, very intelligent questions.